On October 27, 2025, the United States Supreme Court delivered a decision that sent shockwaves through Washington and reverberated across the global economy. The ruling was not just a legal milestone, it was a turning point in the ongoing debate over the limits of presidential power. In a historic move, the court struck down key Trump-era tariffs, fundamentally redefining the balance of power between the president and Congress. This decision challenged the long-standing assumption that the executive branch could act unilaterally on matters of international trade. The justices ruled that the executive branch had overstepped its constitutional authority, setting a powerful precedent that will shape U.S. trade policy for generations to come. Legal scholars are already calling it one of the most significant checks on presidential power in recent history. The decision has ignited fierce political debate and widespread economic uncertainty, forcing lawmakers, business leaders, and citizens alike to reconsider the role of the presidency in shaping the nation's economic future. This landmark case was the culmination of years of legal battles and public outcry over whether the president could unilaterally impose sweeping economic measures without congressional approval. The stakes were high, with billions of dollars and the very structure of American governance hanging in the balance. Critics of the tariffs argued that these actions bypassed Congress, which the Constitution designates as the primary authority on matters of commerce and trade. They warned that unchecked executive power could undermine democratic principles. Ultimately, the Supreme Court sided with those demanding greater congressional oversight and a more restrained executive branch, reaffirming the importance of checks and balances in the American system. The ruling has immediate and far-reaching economic consequences, including massive refunds now owed by the U.S. Treasury to affected businesses. Financial markets are bracing for volatility as the implications of the decision unfold. It's a pivotal moment for American law, the economy, and the very structure of governance. The decision will be studied and debated for years to come. The Supreme Court has redrawn the lines of authority. Future presidents will now face a dramatically altered landscape when it comes to setting trade policy, with Congress reclaiming a central role in decisions that affect the nation and the world. A tariff is a tax placed on goods that are brought into a country from abroad. These taxes are paid by importers, and the cost often gets passed on to consumers, making foreign products more expensive compared to those made domestically. Tariffs have been used for centuries as a tool by governments to protect local industries from foreign competition, encourage consumers to buy homegrown products, and sometimes to raise revenue for the government itself. By making imported goods costlier, tariffs are designed to give domestic manufacturers an edge, helping them compete and potentially grow their businesses. This can lead to more jobs and investment at home, but it can also mean higher prices for consumers and strained relations with trading partners. The Trump administration made tariffs a cornerstone of its America First economic policy. Officials argued that decades of free trade agreements had led to the loss of American manufacturing jobs and created massive trade deficits, especially with countries like China and Mexico. They believed that imposing tariffs would help level the playing field and bring jobs back to the U.S. Tariffs were imposed on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of products from countries such as China, Canada, and the European Union. The goal was to pressure these trading partners to change what the administration saw as unfair trade practices, like intellectual property theft or government subsidies to their own industries. To enact these sweeping tariffs, the administration invoked the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, a law passed in 1977. By declaring that large trade deficits posed a national emergency, the White House claimed broad authority to act without waiting for Congress. This move allowed the president to bypass the usual legislative process, sparking immediate controversy and a wave of legal challenges from businesses, lawmakers, and advocacy groups who questioned the legality of such actions. Critics argued that IEEPA was originally intended for emergencies like terrorism or war, not for broad economic disputes. They worried that using it for trade policy set a dangerous precedent, giving the president too much unchecked power. The tariffs affected a vast range of goods, from raw materials like steel and aluminum to finished products such as electronics and machinery. Supporters claimed these measures were vital for protecting national security and ensuring long-term economic prosperity. In court filings and public statements, the administration used forceful language, insisting that tariffs were essential to defending American strength and independence in a rapidly changing global economy. This aggressive approach set the stage for a high-stakes constitutional showdown. raising fundamental questions about the limits of presidential power and the role of Congress in shaping trade policy. Opponents argued that by acting alone, the president was seizing authority that the Constitution had always reserved for Congress, igniting a fierce debate over the future of American trade policy and the balance of power in Washington. The Supreme Court's decision was a direct rebuke of the executive branch's use of emergency powers to set trade policy. The court ruled the Trump administration exceeded its authority under IEEPA, invalidating a core part of its economic strategy. The justices found the law lacked explicit language authorizing tariffs, a critical factor in their decision. The ruling affirmed that a president cannot declare a national emergency to justify any economic policy. Trade deficits, the court said, did not fit the traditional definition of a national emergency. This outcome is a victory for those who argued the president's actions were unconstitutional overreach. The decision sets a new legal guardrail. Major economic policies require explicit congressional approval. The Supreme Court's ruling was grounded in the major questions doctrine. This principle requires clear, specific congressional authorization for actions of vast economic and political significance. The justices applied it to the Trump tariffs, noting the IEEPA lacked explicit approval for such sweeping measures. The court compared the scale of the tariffs to other executive actions previously struck down under this doctrine. The decision reflects growing judicial concern over unchecked executive power. By demanding clarity from Congress, the doctrine reinforces the separation of powers. This case marks a landmark extension of the doctrine into trade and emergency powers. The court has made clear only Congress can authorize such major trade initiatives. The Supreme Court's decision triggered immediate economic shockwaves. The U.S. Treasury must refund an estimated $87 billion to importers, creating a major budget challenge. For American companies, the ruling brings relief and complexity. Billions in refunds, but years of disrupted supply chains. Consumers, who bore the brunt of tariff costs, may see lower prices and eased inflation. Economists predict the end of tariffs will benefit households, acting like a small tax cut. However, some domestic industries once shielded by tariffs now face renewed foreign competition. The refund process will be complex and slow. The full economic effects, positive and negative, will take time to unfold. The ruling marks a major shift for businesses, consumers, and the government. In the days leading up to the pivotal Supreme Court decision, President Trump intensified his rhetoric, launching a high-profile campaign that warned of dire economic consequences if the tariffs he imposed were overturned. He repeatedly took to the airwaves and social media, insisting that removing the tariffs would devastate American industries and cost countless jobs, painting a picture of looming financial chaos. Trump also accused foreign governments and international lobbyists of attempting to sway the court's decision, framing the legal challenge not just as a policy dispute, but as a direct attack on his presidency and the nation's sovereignty. In a dramatic move just before the ruling, Trump escalated ongoing trade disputes by announcing a fresh round of tariffs targeting imports from Canada and Brazil, signaling his willingness to double down on his hardline approach. After the Supreme Court's decision was announced, Trump reacted with visible anger and frustration, condemning the justices and calling the ruling a betrayal that, in his words, would weaken America's global standing and economic security. Rather than engaging with the court's legal reasoning, Trump launched a series of public attacks on the institution itself, questioning its legitimacy and accusing it of political bias. His actions and statements projected defiance rather than acceptance, fueling speculation about whether the administration would comply with the ruling or seek ways to circumvent it, leaving the nation and its allies uncertain about what might come next. The confrontation has ensured that the debate over tariffs, presidential authority, and the balance of power between branches of government will remain at the forefront of national conversation for the foreseeable future. As protests erupt and international observers watch closely, the fallout from this decision has only heightened tensions both at home and abroad, setting the stage for further political and economic uncertainty. Congress's response to the ruling has been deeply divided, mirroring partisan splits. Many Democrats and some Republicans welcome the decision as a restoration of congressional authority. The Senate plans to vote on resolutions to overturn the emergency declarations used to justify the tariffs. However, the House, aligned with Trump, has made it harder to bring such resolutions to a vote. This highlights the president's continued influence over his party and the legislative gridlock. Congress faces a dilemma: reclaim its power or avoid confronting a popular president. The Supreme Court handed Congress a victory, but it's unclear if lawmakers will act decisively. The Supreme Court's decision marks a turning point in American governance and trade policy. By invalidating the president's unilateral use of emergency powers, the court has reasserted Congress's constitutional role. Future presidents will need explicit congressional approval for major trade actions. The ruling extends the major questions doctrine into trade and national security, setting a lasting precedent. In the short term, the country faces economic and political fallout, from massive refunds to ongoing White House defiance. The debate over trade now shifts to Congress, where divisions may complicate progress. The decision affirms that even presidents are bound by the Constitution and laws passed by Congress. The court has reinforced the architecture of American democracy for generations to come.